slow down to speed up later. What I mean by that is that be a little bit more considered. Don't go chasing the market hype and go, everyone's doing agentic AI, so we need to do agentic AI. No, let's just take a step back. Let's understand where this has and get educated on how do we understand how this is going to impact our business? Where is it going to have the most value? Where are we today and where do we want to be? How do we go and address, back to that point earlier, some of these foundations? How do we look beyond the hype? You know.
In the race to adopt AI, are we forgetting the fundamentals? While the world chases the latest shiny object, what if the real key to success lies in the tried and tested foundations of data, people, and process? Welcome to the Anaiya Algorithm, the podcast for leaders who want to build the future intentionally. I'm your host, Magdalene Amegashitsi, the founder of Anaiya Group. Today, we're cutting through the hype with one of the industry's leading pragmatists, Dan Warner. Dan has been on the front lines guiding major organizations through the realities of data and AI transformation. He brings a much needed dose of clarity to the conversation. In this episode, we deconstruct the myth of overnight AI success. We explore why a solid data foundation is non-negotiable, why your people are still your greatest asset, and how to find the practical, effective middle ground between aspiration and reality. If you want to build an AI strategy that actually works, this conversation is your blueprint. Please join me in welcoming Dan Warren. Dan, welcome to the Anaiya Algorithm podcast. It's so wonderful to have you on our show today.
Thank you for having me, Magda. Nice to be here.
Absolutely. Would you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Dan Warner. I've been around the data and technology landscape for far longer than I care to remember, to be honest, but it's about 25 years. Performed various roles throughout that, both in freelance world, but also in permanent. And I would say I probably had a more traditional route through data than most. So started off as an analyst, moved into engineering, moved into architecture, moved into leadership and then senior leadership, but always maintained the finger on the pulse, technical understanding and dabbling, as I call it, in all sorts of different technologies, just to keep myself relevant more than anything. So I understand the implications of these things properly. So there's not much I've not done in the data and AI world or the technology world through the years. Been there through all of the hype cycles as well. And, from the boom of .com, the boom of the smartphone, the boom of cloud. Yeah, I've been around a long time. Too long.
25 years is a long time. With your extensive experience leading data and AI transformation for some of the world's biggest brands, I'm really excited to have you join us.
Very much. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. Let's cut through the noise. There is immense pressure on leaders to adopt AI right now. From your perspective, what is the biggest misconception or piece of hype about AI that you wish more executives would question?
That is a fabulous question. I'll probably talk about for far too long. I mean, there are lots of misconceptions that I think need addressing, but no one wants to sit on a podcast for a week. But I think probably the biggest, and I would say is also the most obvious, is that AI is a magic bullet. Bringing into your business is going to immediately deliver value, is going to make your teams more productive, it's going to have a big impact on your bottom line, it's going to start automating processes, you're going to be able to reduce your workforce, or at least reduce some of the, I'll call it trim the fat around that, to make you more efficient as a business. And I think just the understanding of where you get the most benefit from Gen AI, right? So the content creation behind that, how it actually works beneath the hood. Agents and agentic AI is going around in circles at the moment. That's everywhere, that this is what people should. And I think it's just a misunderstanding from what I see from a lot of leaders that I speak to, is they're buying into some of that hype, right? And actually there's little substance behind it. And just to kind of quantify that a little bit, is AI amazing? Yes, it is, in the right place, understanding where it will have real value and what you need to have in place to be able to capitalize on that.
Awesome. I mean, that's such a critical reality check. When you mentioned that idea of a magic bullet, it's a classic case of, focusing on that shiny new tool rather than the business problem. And it really underscores the need for an intentional strategy before you
Yes.
even touch that technology.
Yeah, exactly. And I think probably just to add to that, AI is a great amplifier, but naturally that has pros and cons. So if you have dysfunction within your business, heavy process, the foundations of your technology estate aren't quite ready, that's going to amplify that, which is not an outcome that you want.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing too much trying to chase down hype. Too much FOMO is still a real problem. Oh, our competitors are doing this. We need to think about doing it. We're going to be falling behind the market. While some of those things have a bit of truth to them, if we think about AI in terms of previous transformational eras right now, I think I always relate back to things like the boom of the internet, .com. We're at dial-up internet stage right now. This is really early, like really early. This is
Yeah.
talking the dial-up internet, like before the days of Google, for example, and Amazon became a thing, and they're two of the world's biggest companies now. So if you think about it in those terms, we're still very early.
That's a very important point you just made there. Thank you for sharing. We find that leaders often want to build the roof before the foundation is poured. You've made a powerful point that when it comes to AI, the tried and tested foundation never change.
Yeah.
So what are those core unchanging foundations that you believe a company absolutely must have in place before they can even think about succeeding with AI?
So there's lots of subtle nuances that we could talk about. Lots of different areas of where those foundations are really important. I think I'll try and bubble it down to three. So first and foremost, and I'll bundle this under a phrase really, which is data that you can trust. Far too often, even in modern enterprises that have gone through a data transformation, they've become a little bit more data driven. They've moved into cloud platforms. They still have trouble with clean, accessible, or easily accessible and understandable and well-governed data. So that is kind of paramount to AI. AI needs data to understand the context about your business. You need to be able to feed that in and also feed out from outputs from AI. Having really solid foundations is crucial when it comes to data. And I see there's various implications of that, right? I could talk about this for quite a long time, but I would say ensure, you will need to have data experts in your business. Where you host that is a matter of debate, even amongst the experts in the industry. My view on that is, it really does depend on the organization, the industry that they work in, and then the culture within that business. But you do need data experts at the helm that can help put all this together and kind of do the stitching, if you like, to make sure that these things are in place. The other two, so the first one I said was data that you can trust. The other thing is, I would say, process and processes that work. So what do I mean by that? I mean, we've all been in organizations or environments where a business process is a cause of frustration. It takes too long. There's parts of that that probably need work. I could use the legal industry as a great example of this, of just the sheer amount of documentation that they have to deal with. And There's businesses out there who have been trying for a long time to automate that, to make life a lot more straightforward, and they haven't achieved that. Why is that important? So AI augments something that you already have that's stable, not
Yeah,
amplify chaos.
I love how you just put that.
The third one would be people that understand the problem. And this is, again, it's a point of contention. I see this quite a lot. There's a lot of fear in the market of AI is taking our jobs. I think we can talk about this probably with a separate question, that there is definitely some areas that are going to change and change significantly and have actually already changed. But why do I say about the people? A, there is no replacement for human understanding,
Hmm.
knowledge of the business or the organization. And some of that could even be down to organizational politics, the way that people work within that organization, what leaders are interested in within that business, which can vary quite significantly from one business to another, even in the same industry. People that understand why things are done a certain way, because that context is always vital. I've seen many technology transformations trip over because of a lack of industry specific or organizational or business function specific knowledge, i.e., why accountants are never going to move off Excel as a prime example.
Absolutely. That's a good one.
Trying to get rid of Excel for an accountant, forget it. It's not going to happen. So, I've seen things like that through the years. Probably really importantly, that human in the loop, as it'll be called, as a kind of buzz line or tagline in the industry, is super smart. Okay. You've got the knowledge of the world at your fingertips, and actually the outputs that you get from it, the way that it gets leveraged, even the work that the agent does is only as smart as the humans that guide it.
Awesome. Well, that's really elaborate. It's a perfect summary of what we call the intentional foundation. But it's not the glamorous part, but as you've laid out really beautifully, without that bedrock of, data you can trust, processes that work, people that understand the problems of the business, of the industry, and all the other bits you've mentioned, any AI initiative is built on sand and is destined to fail most likely than not, which is really crucial for our audience to understand.
Yeah, and I think, the reason that we talk about those being foundations is, if we think back to before ChatGPT became a thing and everyone going, oh, look at this cool, shiny new toy that's come out. Those things were important then, right? They haven't changed. You wanted to go and modernize your technology or data estate into a cloud platform purpose built to serve that kind of model. You still need to get those things right.
Absolutely.
It really has not changed. And I doubt ever will.
That's absolutely right. And if we can just zone into that data reality or the data-driven bedrock a bit more, you've noted that only a few clients have truly nailed that data properly. This is something we see constantly, the gap between being data rich and insight poor.
Yeah.
And our work often focuses on bridging that exact gap. From your perspective, what does it really take to become a data-driven organization? And what's the hard foundational work you've seen succeed?
That's a fabulous question. And I would also say a point of contention.
Yes.
I have seen many times about organizations saying to me or to a team that I've been a part of, we want to become data driven. When you start drilling beneath that, actually all they're really after is better reporting, better insight. They're sick of being in meetings talking about sales or revenue figures and someone comes and presents a different figure and they're having to have a debate about where that came from. There is an organization I know that has multiple sales metrics and they were having to go through a really laborious process to try and consolidate those. They had valid reasons for having more than one, but the understanding behind them, because it came from different functions, was not something that was documented or well understood across the business. So, of course, I think always comes up. What do I mean by being data driven? So in my mind, it's not about having a modern platform and modern analytics. That's kind of one part. It's where do you fall on a data maturity curve, right? Do you look So you're doing things really well with data, but actually the insight that you're looking at is very retrospective. You're always looking back at what has happened rather than looking forward at what could happen, leveraging insight in a way and the data that you hold in a way that you understand the patterns in that data. Customers is a great example of this, right? You analyze purchase behavior, purchase patterns. You understand, they might be, as an example, they could be late 20s, and, people as a variation, people in their late 20s will generally, they'll get married. When they get married, a few years later, they'll have children, and kind of thinking through that continual evolution and cycle of a customer. That's something you can use data for.
Yeah.
You can hold those metrics. You can store information about your customer. And I use this in retail quite a lot because I've seen there's some brilliant retailers out there, but that is a kind of fundamental thing that they do in pockets. They don't do in unison across the board, capturing all of this. So when I say about being data driven, it's things like that, right? You're capturing all of the possible metrics that you could capture. Just looking back at past performance or past events, you're looking forward, you're predicting them. That is influencing and driving your decisions. You've built a key culture across the business that data is an asset. Everybody understands the data that's within that organization. It's well documented. It's very clear. You know who the SMEs are for that in your particular business. You could have somebody in HR that is brilliant with data and analyzing people data. They might be your go-to person for kind of ad hoc analysis, trying to understand what's happening. Much broader than, we've got a modern data warehouse in a cloud platform, pick your flavor of whether it's Microsoft, Amazon or Google or others. But it's what I would call, and I use this quite a lot, a data ecosystem. Like that is one pillar of many, and it's everybody uses data to drive the business forward. You're making decisions based on that. Obviously, there will be subtle nuances of, this is based on industry knowledge, gut instinct, intuition. This is where I think's going, foresight, insight. Those kind of things obviously happen quite a lot, or even just understanding your customers better, which might come from somebody that's a veteran in the game that's been around for 30 odd years, and they just know that these things are important. But having data to kind of add some substance to that and back that up and how to make those decisions, that is what I would call truly data driven. Even before, and AI is important, right? I have debates with people about, is Gen AI and agentic AI just a glorified form of process automation that we've seen before? I think there's probably a bit of truth in that. And in all honesty, I would say that certainly for things like this, making sure that you've built out that proper, from very core of your organization, culture around data is vital. Like back to, if you think about the three that I mentioned earlier, that, you've started to utilize data to automate business processes, right? You're integrating really well with all of your business systems. You've managed to, where possible, because this is not always possible, get rid of legacy technology and legacy systems that are kind of hamstringing you as a business. Data is seen as the lifeblood to the organization. You build in things, and I've seen this quite a lot, right? That you build in failure and recoverability. So, if something happens, which it does occasionally, right? You might have if you're hosting in a cloud platform, you might have a data center outage or a service outage. Does that take down all of your real-time analytics that you're trying to look at across your, if I use retail quite a lot because it's a good example. You're trying to look at your store estate and what's happening across, or even e-commerce, right? You're trying to understand continual throughput on Black Friday weekend, and there's some kind of imprint that has an impact. What failure and recoverability do you have in that to kind of move over so that there is no impact on the customer, especially during key trading periods? Just all of these things that people kind of gloss over or try and paper over the cracks, and that is, say, to be truly data driven as an organization. That's why there's so little that have done it. And I think probably the other, I mean, again, I did say this might be something I could talk about for a while, but there's several other aspects to this. I think the understanding of the data domain. We talked about foundations a little bit, but, if you want to become really great at this, what do you need? Who do you need? How do you want to go about it? What's important for your organization? Because what works for one doesn't necessarily work for another. the expectations of those senior level positions, your executive directors, your CXO, as I'll call them, you bring in, as an example, a chief data officer. You're saying you want to become data driven. They put a plan together, and I see a lot of talking about the strategy, and some brilliant strategy has been written, but then things fall apart in execution because of, quite simply, business value, misaligned expectations, expecting these things can be done really quickly when they can't. This stuff takes time. It's not like
Yeah.
you can go and do something in the shape of a few months. I mean, I used to use this example back in consulting world quite a lot. We could build you a best of breed data platform, right, that's got all the bells and whistles in less than 6 months, easily.
Why not need it? Yeah.
Will that be something that is future proof? Will that be something that kind of transcends throughout your whole organization? Is that the thing that solved all of the problems you've had? It's part one.
Yeah, that's true.
And then the other thing I also use is, and I've seen this a number of times, is when others go, okay, so that example, we can build you a best of breed data platform or data ecosystem in less than 6 months. And then they go and try and do that in the public sector, into central government or into financial services, and they completely forget about the regulation, the fact that there is documented and formal processes that you have to go through, the people that then get involved in all of that, the privacy and everything else that has to come into play, and just the knock-on effect, right? And that 6 months quickly turns into 2 years before you're achieving that kind of output. So sorry, I offloaded quite a lot there.
That was really useful. You went into various angles to being data driven. You also talked about true data culture. Thanks for sharing. And on that same subject, could you share a real world anonymized story of a company that tried to implement an exciting AI project but failed because their data foundation was weak? And what's the key lesson there?
It's a great question. And I think there are, even unanonymized, right, a litany of examples of this. The recent research that came out from MIT about failure rate for AI projects. Anyone that's been in the industry, especially in like a managing consulting firm or in professional services or even a tech vendor, kind of dealing with these things on a day-to-day basis. Failure rate for AI projects has always been a challenge. Or Gen AI became a thing. You used to talk to people about artificial intelligence, machine learning, algorithm, deep learning, where it can have a real impact. And there are success stories, don't get me wrong, big success stories as well. But it was always a bit of, oh yeah, that's not really that important. Or, you'd start getting into technical specifics at that point because it wasn't well understood. And some people would just, completely gloss over and not really understand what you were talking about, look at you wide-eyed and nod, and they haven't got a clue what you've just spoken about. So I've seen a lot of that. So one of the ones I'll use, and this is no slight on them as an organization, but it is kind of testament to this is happening in the market. We need to do something. Boards or shareholders are turning around and go, right, we want AI. We want to do everything AI. We need AI in our business. We need to do this. Those foundations as an organization are not in place, and they rush to get something out there, right? And there are examples of this through the years. Microsoft have had that problem. Google have had that problem. One of the ones that kind of stands in my mind in recent memory was DPD. Released an automated assistant built on OpenAI's models and ChatGPT underneath the hood, and they've not put the safeguards in place around that. So, of course, people being people, humans being humans, they always try and break stuff. And they're getting the DPD assistant is supposed to be there to help customers to write poems criticizing the organization, which, of course, then the joys of social media these days went viral. Probably,
I think fundamentally, it's clear that there are key pieces to the foundation that needs to be in place to ensure that AI projects also increase its chance of success.
Yeah, exactly. So I think first of all, there's building on sand, like you mentioned, right?
Yes.
Those foundations aren't in place, and someone's not really articulated that back up to the board to go and address that. There's a really successful UK organisation that kind of went through that cycle. Unfortunately for them, their CEO understood the problem. He was sharp enough, he was savvy enough to understand the problem. He's quite a rare individual anyway for getting his head around this stuff. So that's quite they're an exception from that point of view, but it still didn't get away from the fact that they needed to deliver value and deliver value quickly. They had all sorts of modernization issues with legacy technology, silos across the business, which is still a huge challenge. Just referring to business functions just randomly, finance were off doing their own thing, HR were doing their own thing, operations and warehouse were doing their own thing. Nobody is bringing that back together. And the reason that they're going off and doing all of that is the team that they had were not delivering for those functions. So of course, naturally, they have their own budgets. They just went off to go and solve that problem for themselves because they can't sit waiting for somebody else. And that's something that, the good old business versus IT, business functions versus IT conversation that I'm sure many people have come across before. IT are delivering, so I'm going to go off and do it myself because I can't wait.
Yeah.
And then just trying to bring those things to market quickly, right? The other big challenge and I think this is also testament to why there's such a high failure rate. So there's the use case, because all these things, you need a great use case. So it's understanding what that use case is, which iteration of AI makes most sense. I see loads, and I mean loads, like 90+% of the use cases I come across that aren't actually a Gen AI one. So yes, you can do something fundamental with data. You can do something with some machine learning, the algorithms in machine learning. It could be something that you do with process automation for deep learning. But it's not Gen AI use case. It's not a great Gen AI use case. I think that part of a wider problem is that just the understanding of what makes a great AI use case,
Certainly.
where it's best leverage. The other one, I think I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but it's the business outcome. And there's several facets to this. Do you get the understanding and the sponsorship early? Normally that mandate comes from the top down anyway. Have you gone through an incubation of trying to deliver some innovation around this and understand and formulate it properly? Have you built the metrics to track to go, this is the value that's delivering? Because that's something I've seen quite a lot.
Yeah.
But it's, I'll give a great example. We want to replace our call center staff with AI. It's like, well, when you say something like that to me, it triggers me because you could, but that would be a big mistake. Right.
Absolutely.
We've seen this with organizations in the US getting rid of marketers and content creators and things like that. And then within 6 months going, oh, actually, we've made a big mistake.
Yeah.
We're not delivering the same quality as we were before because there's no human in the middle of all this giving the proper guidance and then having to go back and rehire them. So that triggers me for a number of reasons. So that being one is that replacing staff with AI is not the right use case. It's not the right thing to do. Yes, there will be elements of people's jobs that will get automated, but should be, and the best use cases around this are augmenting human capability. So if you want to do something in the call center, we've all, I'm sure, come across chatbots online when, you might be talking to your bank, you might be buying something online, you might be going through a complaints forum or dealing with, back to that contact center or call center point earlier, and you're talking to a chatbot and it's just really rudimentary, right? It doesn't really understand your frustrations, doesn't understand much about the business. It gives you pre-baked multiple choice questions and answers that you go through, and they're just rubbish, frankly. So at that point, you're going, I just want to speak to a human, whether that chat, whether that's through picking up the phone, whether that's email, it doesn't really matter. You very quickly reach that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the other thing is, so AI could be brilliant at holding a surface in those conversations, but the key thing is there will always be a reasonably high proportion of those interactions that are going to want to speak to a human.
I completely agree with you, Dan. So, for a leader listening who knows their data house isn't in order, what is the first, most impactful step they can take to start building that solid foundation?
Now, that's a great question. I think so. Trying to answer this simply without
Yeah,
going off on a tangent. If you're wanting to address these, first and foremost is really understanding where you are today. What kind of so what am I meaning by that is what are the problems, constraints that you have? What is it that you get in terms of reporting, insight, analytics currently? How long do those things take? So, if you do a lot of overnight processes and processing, sorry, as an example, how long does that take? How painful is it? Is there stability in terms of do you have jobs that fail and then you're not getting reports until middle of the day? All of that kind of stuff. So I think first and foremost, and then I can go on about this for a long time, understanding where you are today. Right. And I'll hark back to the maturity point I made earlier, right? Because that
yes,
gives you a level of maturity of this is how we handle data. This is how it's provided. Here's the problems that we have currently and issues, and some of those could be business critical, but issues we face. Then it's also understanding what is it that we don't know from the data that we hold? What is it that we wish we could have, but we don't have, because that's kind of building a little bit of a bridge of like, we know what these problems are. Here's some stuff that we'd like, but we can't. Have you given stakeholders a tool to do their own ad hoc analysis? Do they have an understanding of the data that's been provided into those areas to be
yeah,
able to build that kind of thing themselves? Do you know who the key people are in your organization if you're trying to build a report for something or understand, might be business performance or performance of a marketing campaign or something like that? Or you're looking at a new product line or a new service line or something like that. Do you know who those key people are to go and
yeah,
speak, to go and have that conversation? If you don't, do you have a forum and a mechanism to at least fire that out and somebody will come back and give you an answer?
yeah,
So that's that one. That's kind of, this is where we are today. The other one is, where do you want to get to? And this is not necessarily you're the, I don't know, you're the CTO. You might have a vision for where you want to take the company from a technology
yeah,
point of view. And what needs addressing. These are our business objectives. This is what we want to achieve over the next 5 years or so, next 12 months, whatever it is. These are the key requirements and metrics, outcomes that we're striving towards. Like,
yeah,
revenue is what I've seen a lot. Like, we're currently a billion revenue. We want to get to 2 billion revenue.
yeah,
It's like, so we're going to need to do these things. Do you understand what that is? And then as part of that, do you have a surviving or supporting data strategy to get you to, or a technology strategy to get you to that point? So
yeah.
those 2 points, where are you today? What's your future state and your
Great.
future vision for the organization? Some of that, like, it's not like going through months and years of doing visionary strategy work. It could just be something on a single page.
Yeah,
Because that allows you to go, right, here's where we are, this is where we want to get to. So you can start then to think about the mapping between the two. You then look at, within those things, there will be varying levels throughout the organization of what I would call data maturity. Some people and functions will be better at it than others. There might be, I'll call low-hanging fruit. There might be some
yeah,
things knocking around in the organization that you can go, actually, back to that call center, contact center point, we've got a chat bot. It's quite old. It's rubbish. People don't really engage with it much. That might be a really great place to start to go and think about how we could leverage Gen AI in that scenario. And
yeah,
even not even the customer facing aspect. It could be the business facing as internal facing aspect of, we hold all of this data about our customers. How could we build a Gen AI pilot to go and synthesize all of that data and look for patterns within our customer base that we've not even thought of. And it's something I talk about relatively frequently is, so there's the known knowns, there's the unknowns, but then there's the unknown unknowns, which is Gen AI is great at going, and this is where you pay the big bucks for the experts in data, is the unknown unknowns, right? So you know what you know what you don't know, but you don't know what you don't know, if that makes sense.
It does.
So that is how I would think about that. And then starting to break those use cases down, articulate them into what do we think is going to have meaningful business impact. That could be uplifting revenue. It could be improvement in customer satisfaction. It could be workforce satisfaction. The other thing I would throw in there is I would be surprised if a large percentage of any organization's workforce are not using Gen AI currently, even from a personal point of view.
Yes.
I would fully expect that a lot of them are also putting company confidential or commercially sensitive information into them, which you have limited control over, right? I've seen organizations go, well, we're just going to block all of this when you're on the corporate network. Well, their mobile phone's not on the corporate network.
Exactly.
Where was I going with that is understanding their knowledge and use of these tools within the business. Another suggestion I would make is probably an ideas forum. So don't try and within a senior leadership capacity, you might have some really great ideas for where you want AI to go solve a problem. There is no substitute for asking the people directly in those roles. Back to that customer facing or contact center, call center point, ask your employees, ask your staff, get their feedback, garner their ideas, because that will help shape some of this. That's going to be meaningful for what you deliver. You might have a view. There is no substitute from hearing that from the people that live and breathe this stuff every day.
That's brilliant, actionable advice. Really elaborate how you need to understand where you are, understand where you want to get to, identify great AI use cases that you can start leveraging. So it's not about boiling the ocean. It's about finding a single high value area and build that right foundation from there.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is, I think so the 2 points that I made about understanding where you are today and where you want to get to, I have seen very infrequently that both are in existence, or at least the full transparency of like, this is where we are today. And they've missed some of the real challenges. That's why there's big consulting firms that exist, because generally what will happen is that, and even, technology vendors do this as well, that there'll be third-party partners and suppliers that are involved in supporting projects in your business that have a better understanding of your business and your challenges than you do. Right? In some instances, they're helping to connect the dots for you.
Yes.
They're also people that you should listen to for that reason, in that they're starting to interface and get involved in stuff down in the weeds that you don't have time, capacity, or interest in getting involved in, but it's important context for you to understand.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. And so now let's get into what I call the human algorithm, the role of the team. I love the point you made earlier about how you shouldn't be replacing your team with AI, and you gave some fantastic examples of scenarios where it's all gone wrong with that ambitious attempt to replace AI, a team with AI. So a core pillar of our philosophy is augmenting human expertise, not alternating it. In your view, how should a leader be thinking about the evolution of their team's roles in the AI era, rather than their replacement?
What an open question. So I think if I use a little bit of an example, because I see quite a lot of misinformation in the market. And if we think about, AI is going to take everybody's job, including ours, apparently.
Yes.
I just don't think that that's the case at all. So I'll use an example, and then I'll talk a little bit more about it. So an example would be, right, you're a personal assistant, okay, to a senior leader. So you were someone that, be given admin. It might have been in form of paper notes or meeting minutes, managing somebody's diary, saying you've got this meeting, or actually you've been invited to this, you've now got a clash. Anything that involved a large amount of administration and typing work. Do you still need to do that? No, you don't. You don't need to be sat in those meetings necessarily. AI can go and do all the transcription for you. It can generate the meeting notes. The accuracy levels of those things now are phenomenal. In some cases, mind blowing. The subtle things that it picks up of actions from a meeting that someone might have missed is just fabulous. Management of diaries and going, right, this is what I've got on. It's great use cases that I'm not going to start name dropping products, but it was just one that I used while I was at Microsoft in terms of being away on holiday, having millions of different internal team meetings that and product meetings that you wouldn't be able to get to because you're with customers, where you would ordinarily need a PA for that stuff, or you'd have to find the time to go and catch up on those by yourself if it's a recorded meeting. Now you could just ask AI the question, like, what did I miss? Tell me about the key insights from that meeting. Were there any action items that were assigned to me? If it's something that the team that you're managing, what was the sentiment? How are they feeling? Was there anything that's discussed that was important to follow up on? Were there any open-ended questions? That kind of stuff. Back to the point about holiday. I've been away on holiday. I've received 1 million. If this is people go dark, because not everybody does, but out of all of the emails that I've received, can you categorize them? What's important to respond to? What's informational as a customer? What's one of my direct reports? Can you synthesize all of that and give me a priority list? Tell me about my upcoming meetings. Can you help me do prep based on what's happened while I've been away? All of that stuff is there here and now with AI. Not everybody's leveraging it in that way. So back to that point of you're a PA, does that mean that you don't need a PA at all? Because I know a lot of PAs, they don't just do the helping with the drafting of meeting minutes. They might be helping a senior exec with life outside of work, saying, right, your wife said you've got to go and do X tomorrow for the children. I've put that into your diary, and let's make sure we keep some of that separate. Yes, you can have AI do that, but AI is not going to go off and have all of those conversations for you. So there's aspects of that. But it could be meeting transcripts, or you need to issue an internal announcement. As an example, someone's getting promoted, someone's moving on, there's been a change in business strategy in an exec meeting. You need to issue communications. That could be internal, that could be external. Do you just take the verbatim what the AI drafted from that meeting and send that straight out? No, you need human eyes on it. What would ordinarily happen is if a PA is supporting, they would help synthesize some of that and give you a first draft for you to review and approve and sign off, all that kind of stuff. So that I always use as an example of an evolution in a role. So I keep people say, you don't need a PA anymore. It's like, well, some instances, no.
Yeah.
Those human aspects aren't going away. AI is not going to address that.
Absolutely.
All of that data either, right? So back to the point I made about, AI acting as a PA in a corporate environment will have all of your corporate information. I made the point about, the senior exec whose wife said he's got to go, and it might be picking the kids up from school, right? You've got to go pick the kids up from school tomorrow. Let's put that in your calendar. That might have come through as a text message to his phone. It might be that, it's been sent through as an email into his inbox. There are various ways that could come up. It could be a phone call. It's like, oh, I know he's in a senior meeting. I'll call his PA because I can tell her or him, that kind of thing. Isn't disappearing, and that's not something that you can surface.
This is awesome. This topic is very important because it's the buzz of AI. With it comes the anxiety of is my role at risk? What's going to happen? And so it's a big topic. It's an important topic. It touches every humanity and every industry.
Yeah.
Partly because I think the buzz brings a level of excitement. There's this expectation. However, there's a reality as well. So there is this two bits, and we need to find that middle ground. How should a leader practically manage that, the aspiration of their boards who want revolutionary with the reality of their team's current capabilities and their data's readiness plus the reality of what AI can do. What would be your advice on how a leader can practically manage the aspiration and get that middle ground?
Hire me. Yeah. So the way I would address this is thinking about, like, in the mindset of the board or the executive leadership team, the shareholders, the non-exec directors, whoever it is that is kind of mandating this. They want what I would call revolution, which is a step on the road. Okay. That's normally the end result. So they want to revolutionize their organization because they get the possibilities of what this could mean. Back to that point earlier around efficiency, productivity, cost reduction, improvement in revenue, growth into an area that they had as an idea that AI could help accelerate. Ordinarily, what you will find is that teams, functions within a business, even kind of entities within that organization are ready for evolution, the revolution that the board's demanding. I think that this is a real challenge that I would think certainly any leader in the data space, but a lots of senior leaders are kind of facing into at the moment is how do we manage this? And I think so firstly, that highlights something, which is there's two different speeds there, right? Evolution is the way that I would have thought about this, I'm just going to change how I was going to answer that. So the way I
Sure.
would have thought this before was probably I'll use the pandemic, which is came up with a bit of a tagline, right? So the pandemic hit. The first thing that organizations need to do was change operations to support social distancing, support lockdown, support remote working if they didn't have that capability. What would you bundle that under as a title? That would be your response phase. Okay, so you respond to an event that's happened. And you can change the terminology on this. What do you
Yeah.
do once you've done that? You reset or reflect, which is like, right, we've done that, we've fixed that burning fire, we put that out. We're now in a phase of like, we understand what we need to do as an organization to do some modernization or do that evolution. What does that look like? And then the last bit I would put under renew, which is you've done the response, you've done the reset or the reflection, you understand whereabouts you are, what needs to change, how it needs to change, how you bring that to life. The renew is you start to take go on that journey to your revolution. And those things are normally a process that you would go through, right? There's various different
Yeah.
forms and iterations of this. So, it's thinking through, and this comes back to that transformational point we were talking about earlier, which is, your board has aspirations, they've set a vision, they see innovation, they want pilots and outcomes. The evolution part and the response part is also thinking about, what is realistic, what's building upon our foundations, what can we do that satisfies that craving from the board and the aspirations from the board
Yeah.
versus making incremental gains and incremental process so that we're not like dropping BAU to go and deliver transformation or innovation. That's something that
Yeah.
I have, and vice versa, right? That's something I have seen throughout my whole career, is organizations neglect to separate the transformational work that they're doing and the BAU that they have to continue to support. So
Hmm.
I've seen this in data teams, particularly in that, they'll be working on some transformational project. It could be a migration into a new tool within a cloud platform from an on-premise system. Something goes wrong with BAU and then they drop all of that transformational stuff to go do BAU rather than separating out and go, right, we'll have a team or a pod that's going to work on and continue to support BAU. The rest are on the transformational efforts and they don't get pulled in unless it's business critical. The house is falling down. So I waffled and went off a bit of a tangent there, but that would be my advice, is looking at what's the low hanging fruit that can start to satisfy those board aspirations.
Yeah.
being transparent and realistic on what continues to build on those foundations, but allows you to start to progress some of those initiatives. And I think what's happened is, certainly across industry, which is why the failure rates are so high, is there's been a bit of a rush in, oh, actually, we need to go do this because the board have done it, and there's not been that expectation setting, as I would call it, from the outset of, right, yes, we can support going doing this, but here's some of the things that we're going to need to address. Here's some of the challenges we'll face. Here's where I'd advise and recommend starting. And here, if they're saying, okay, we want to achieve a 20% uplift in productivity across the board, how long does that take? Because that's not something that you can go and do in the space of a week. That takes time. And how do you track that, more importantly? So it's expectation management. I think it's making sure similar sort of talk track as what we were talking about earlier, but what foundations exist? What's the vision? Where are we today? What could we address? What business value and business outcome are we aiming towards? How do we balance that with everything else that we've got going on? How do we manage the expectations? So the budget or investment that's needed, the time it will take, the people it will take to do it, the technology decisions as well, because there's a million different models out there. Which one's the right one? And then fundamentally as well, of course, the chosen use case.
Yeah, that's really helpful. You've put it in the most tactical way, the idea of finding a middle ground being an art in itself that leadership in this era would require. It requires a leader who can act as a translator between the board's vision and the team's reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, this is something else that is a challenge. It really does depend on the nuances in an organization, the demands of the board, business performance as well, because the business might not be performing particularly well, in which case this could have a transformative effect, in which case the pressure to deliver faster is far higher. It's just it's such a difficult thing to get right. And actually, the really great CIOs, CDOs, CTOs that I've come across and worked with are kind of messaging that back up regularly, right? This is where we are. This is what we need to do. Here's the journey that we're on. And then when something like AI comes into the mix, it's not a shock. Like, we want to go do AI. Of like, okay, yes, but we need to go do this first. Because if we don't do this, this is the knock-on effect. The AI that pilot that we try to run isn't going to work. Or it might work, it might be brilliant, but we don't have the people to support it. All those things are kind of, I see happening in senior level and senior leadership discussions and boardrooms and regular meetings on, I would say, well, I won't say daily basis, but a weekly basis. Those things happen.
This has been very insightful and educational. Before we get to the final question, I want you to share a bit around, the path forward. It feels like what leaders need is a clear way to assess their starting point. So this is why we developed our intentional governance framework by Anaiya Group. If a CEO gave you a mandate to make their organization AI ready, what are the first 3 things you would assess to understand their true readiness?
So first and foremost, and probably the most obvious actually, is data health. So can they and do they trust their core data assets as it is today? And if the answer is no, or they're trusting something within that is turning out to be a bit of a fallacy, then that is something that needs to be addressed for AI. That can have a variety of different ways to think about that. That could be integration between systems, data integration platforms and things like that is quite a rare thing that I've come across. So that could be one. Another one, process maturity. Are key operational processes stable? Are they repeatable? Are they well understood? Are they documented? Is there any shadow IT or side of desk activities happening that you've not captured? That are really important? Is there any particular subtleties in the way that someone or a function within your business performs their role or their job, to kind of feed into where does AI make sense to act as a wrapper or automate mundane processes? Lastly, and I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but I think I would put it under people. So people, mindset, culture. What's the understanding of the business of AI? What's the general level and sense of sentiment towards it? Are people fearful so that they
Yeah.
want to back off from any of this? They're not seeing the positive aspects of what that could really mean for them. Do they understand how AI is going to augment their work and support teams or senior leaders to work better and faster?
Yeah.
Training. A lot of people won't have had any formal training. They might have seen some stuff online. They might have seen a prompt and gone, oh, that's cool. But they don't really understand the contextual nuances behind these models and how they work. What prompt type and style do you use when, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
They would be the three core things I would start with is what's the health of your data? How mature, documented and well understood are your operational and business processes? Where are you with your people and culture, and what do they kind of feel and understand about all of this?
Yeah. Thank you. This is a fantastic practical checklist. Thank you for that. And to bring it all together, what is the one piece of advice you would give a leader to help them build a more intentional, pragmatic, and ultimately successful AI strategy for the long term?
Great question. So I've used this terminology a lot through the years, and I think a lot of people have kind of misunderstood what I mean. So, firstly, I would say slow down to speed up later. What I mean by that is that be a little bit more considered. Don't go chasing the market hype. Don't go, everyone's doing agentic AI, so we need to do agentic AI. No, let's just take a step back. Let's understand where this has and get educated on, because the vendors will quite happily talk to you about all of this. There's experts knocking around all over the place. How do we understand how this is going to impact our business? Where is it going to have the most value? Where are we today and where do we want to be? How do we go and address, back to that point earlier, some of these foundations? How do we look beyond the hype? Sam Altman has come out in the last few weeks talking about there being a bit of a bubble. Well, I think there's a bit of a hype bubble. I don't think there's that much of a bubble around AI. You can have real positive, lasting, transformative benefits. The problem is there's been so much hype around it,
Yeah.
and there's so many people out there that have just suddenly become AI experts overnight,
Yes.
that there's a little bit of a misunderstanding of where it adds real benefit. So that's where I mean, slow down, be a bit more considered. Don't go chasing the shiny toy. Think about those fundamentals. Think about what's important for your organization. Think about your organizational culture, because this is, again, we spoke a little bit about data transformations earlier.
Yeah.
The reason that it doesn't, what works in one business doesn't work in another is generally the people, the
Yes.
culture of the business, the values that they hold, how things work today. That's not changed in AI world. And I would say to try and simplify that. So slow down to speed up, look beyond the hype, solidify your foundations. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Get your data right. Make sure that your technology estate is there to support this, that you have the people and the process ready to support this.
Yeah.
Make sure you bring your people on the journey with you and you focus on solving your real business challenges. So, an example, right? You're amazing at marketing. Don't start there first. That's the obvious place to start. Think about where you could really change that. No, you're amazing at marketing, but your finance function is a bit slow and it takes time. There'll be obvious places where you could accelerate within finance by the use of AI. And the problem, something else, I have seen a few experts debating this quite a lot as well. In the AI era, going through this transformation, it shouldn't be a race to just adopt the latest model. The key thing is building the discipline and the agility to bake AI in at the right points of your organization in a way that is lasting.
That's amazing. What a powerful and a perfect piece of advice to end on.
Yeah.
Dan, thank you. This has been an incredibly grounding and valuable conversation.
Thank you, Magda. I enjoyed that. Yeah, there's probably so much more that I could have spoken about and could have said, but like I say, no one wants to watch a podcast for a week.
We'd definitely be inviting you for another one because you've got so much to share and we truly enjoyed having you on this podcast. So on this note, on this very powerful and grounding conversation with Dan, it's a vital reminder that before we can build the future, we must master the fundamentals. My key takeaway is that the most intentional AI strategy is one that is built on a bedrock of solid data and empowers rather than replaces human expertise. To connect with Dan and to find a full transcript of this episode, please visit our show notes. And if you're a leader looking to build that solid foundation for your own AI journey, you can learn more about the frameworks we use at Anaiya Group at anaiya.org. Until next time, keep leading intentionally. Thank you.